Welcome, everybody, to episode 125 of Circle of Fellows. My goodness, when we started this, I had no idea that it would last this long. I'm Shel Holtz. I am the Senior Director of Communications at Webcor. We are a commercial general contractor headquartered in San Francisco, and I am in our headquarters office in San Francisco today. And I am joined by four of my colleagues in the group of IABC Fellows. I'll have them introduce themselves in just a minute. But first, I want to let those of you who are watching in real time, I'm very happy to see you here, participate by asking questions, raising issues, challenges, sharing observations and experiences. This is all available to you in the YouTube live chat. I can see them, I can share them on the screen, and we'll make that part of our conversation. Today's topic, communicating in an age of grievance, was inspired by the 2026 Edelman Trust Barometer, which has identified this as the year of grievance. People moving into insularity, only wanting to associate with people who share their values. And that creates some interesting, difficult, challenging communication opportunities that will occupy our thoughts for the next hour. So let's meet the panelists. Priya, let's start with you.
Hello, everyone. Priya Bates from Toronto, Canada, and I am president of Inner Strength Communication here, and we focus on internal communications, employee engagement, and change management. So pleased to be here today.
Great to have you, Priya. Alice.
I'm Alice Brink in Houston, Texas, and I am an independent consultant focusing on primarily the energy industry and working with executives to help shape clear and compelling messages.
Thanks for joining us today, Alice. Jane, you're up.
Hi, everyone. Jane Mitchell from the UK and a very rainy England. I work for myself now, have done, in fact, for about 20 years. Originally helping organizations think about their ethical leadership and leadership behaviors that either did or didn't encourage healthy cultures, and now work as a non-executive director on boards helping organizations think about those very things. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Me too. And Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. I'm here in Vancouver, Canada, where I am, where I head up my own storytelling consultancy, Forwards Communication. I also work as an adjunct professor at the UBC Sauder School of Business, where I teach business communications to the next generation of communication and business leaders, and really kind of geeking out about this topic today. So I'm happy to be here too.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad to have you here. And I'm the only one here who's on the client side, but I did have my own independent consultancy for 21 years. I just got fried on the travel and came back to an employer where I do very little of it. And I'm really happy about that. So let's jump into this topic. The Edelman Trust Barometer, which has been going on for almost 2 decades, I believe. It's great because what you're able to do is look at that longitudinal data and see how things have changed over time. But it shows that 70% of their respondents are unwilling or hesitant to trust anyone with different values, backgrounds, or different information sources. And as communicators, we're trained to reach across audiences, but what happens when the audiences refuse to be reached? Is our fundamental professional premise under threat?
Big question to start off with. Let's just start really big.
I don't want those people watching in real time to click away. Right?
Why don't you?
Exactly. You know, I think that it's really important as communication professionals for us to be aware of the divisions, and those divisions are not only in our professional lives, they're mostly in our personal lives as well. So we're navigating division and a lack of, and people stoking those divisions around the world. And I think one of the things that's really important as a communication professional is to be listening to the discourse, listening to different opinions, because that helps us connect with the audiences that may be part of our organizations in a way that that helps resonate and make the messages real for them as well.
I think you raise a really key point, which is that if messages don't resonate, or if people don't see that they're authentic and real, then I think you'll just compound that division. And so unless an organization, so let me be clear what I mean by organization, unless people, leaders, CEOs within organizations, because organizations are nothing without the people, and they are humane normally, human, then they need to be listening to what it is that the audience is thinking. Even if they're not saying it, they'll be by their actions displaying what it is that they're thinking. And it feels as though there's sort of an intersection between courage and humility here, which is, okay, there are certain things I really want to say, but I also need to understand that there are people who have concerns and worries, and therefore I need to meet them there. Because if, as a communicator, you are simply in transmit mode, all you will do is, to the point that you're making, Priya, I think, is just compound the problem.
I think that, the Edelman survey talks about trust brokers, and I think that is definitely what the communicator's role is. I've always thought of the communicator in metaphors like the storyteller in the Pueblo Indian tribes who passes down the heritage, and the person who is kind of the conscience of the organization, all of those kinds of things. And being a trust broker comes from that, from the ability to share the culture in an authentic way. And this is primarily internal communications. I think we also need to talk about external communications, but I think internally, definitely we have a role to play.
Yeah, I agree with all of what you're saying, and I know we'll probably dive into this a little bit more as a separate question. But I would say, as listeners and trust brokers, the other filter or skill or new, not a new angle actually, it's an age-old angle, is that ability to listen across multiple audiences and specifically multiple generations in terms of the ways that our audiences are engaging with content and with us and with the humans in organizations, because there's a dramatic difference between the generations in how they're engaging with topics. I was out at a hockey game last night with my 20-year-old son and was delighted at the degree to which he was challenging me on we were debating about hockey and all sorts of other things, and I was very happy with the degree to which he was challenging me, and in ways that were just more sophisticated than I was doing at age 20.
Edelman defines trust brokering as surfacing common interests and translating realities between insulated groups. Sounds like a job description for communications to me, but what organizational authority or positioning do we need to do this work? And do most of us already have that? Do we need to pursue it?
Well, since we're mostly consultants, we come in with a sense of being experts, and we're called in when we're needed. So it's not like we've already been sitting there putting out a newsletter and that's all that is expected of us. We already have the advantage of being able to say, this is what I do, and this is how I can help you. And I think that using this trust barometer, I mean, it's like a marketing tool.
But how about your clients? Do they have that kind of authority? Do they have that agency within their organizations?
Well,
some do, some don't.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Jane.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that organizational authority is a really interesting point. I mean, there are a lot, and I'm sure everyone around this table comes across this all the time. young communicators, younger communicators who go into organizations with the expectation of the organization, as in the leaders in the organization, as to their role. And the thing that I mentor them with is having that sense of strategic leadership, which says when you're confronted with a request to do X, it goes back to the brilliance of the gold quill work plan and so on. That might be an outcome an output that you're talking about, but what's actually the outcome and the impact that you want to have? Work backwards from there and work out how you can guide with that organizational authority a leader who says to you, I want to get that message out and I want to do a blog. Oh my God, really? Well, question that in a respectful way, of course, but guide them through and have the confidence that you do have that organizational authority to make sure that people make the most of those communication channels, whatever they might be.
And I think it depends on who we expect to give us organizational authority. And I think what I see in, having kids in that age group that are coming into the workplace right now is they're not asking for permission. And neither should we if we have the expertise. So I often say that a lot of our challenges are more about confidence than they are about capability. And really there's this opportunity to say, what's the unique role I play? Like Shell, you mentioned, it looks like the job description for a communication professional, right?
Yeah.
If that's it, this is the role I play, and this is the unique perspective that I have that's going to help you achieve your goals.
And probably one of the reasons a few of us at least kind of geek out about this study is because of that intersection, and talk about having the authority to be that trust broker, also having the authority and confidence to bring together elements of what are coming out in studies like this and delivering on that. So assuming a larger scope based on the roles that we're already playing and Jane, you're talking about more entry level or junior level positions, but right through to senior level positions, we are playing this role, full stop.
Well, let's bring this right down to the ground level. One of the data points out of the Edelman Trust Barometer is that 42% of employees would rather switch departments than report to a manager whose values are different than theirs. 34% would reduce the effort that they put into their work under a leader with different beliefs. So we're talking about internal communications. Let's stick with that. I mean, I do think we need to talk about PR at some point, but how should internal communicators address this when even talking about it could be perceived by those employees as taking sides?
I don't know that this is internal communications as much as it is HR. It's really, and kind of where they intersect at creating a culture. So we need to, make sure that we are holding accountable the leaders and the middle managers for supporting the culture. And if the employees are signed on to the culture and the managers are signed on to the culture, you won't have that disconnect. And whether you vote a certain way or watch a certain TV channel shouldn't really come into the workplace if you're focused on the workplace culture rather than your own personal external activities. Is that too pie in the sky?
And I think it's really, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just wondering, Shell, is the question that you're asking related to people not having those conversations and just moving sideways so they don't have to confront the real issues within an internal context? Because certainly that happens from a customer. I just want to make sure I've got the
I think that's
question
right.
Correct.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So I think it equally applies to customer experience. So today, would you believe it? So the Reputation Institute, who are now called RepTrack, issued an article today. So the headline was "Visible Leadership is Back, but Visibility alone isn't enough. And they highlighted 3 specific leaders who have decided that communication is great and that's what needs to be done. So they had Jamie Dimon, they had Satya Nadella, and they had Elon Musk. And one of the pieces of evidence that they highlighted was the fact that Elon Musk has been out there, possibly the most visible CEO the world has ever known, possibly. But in the same time that he has been out there, I'm just going to make sure I get these figures right. Tesla's reputation has declined 18 points over the 5 years, and vehicle sales have fell by 9% in 2025 alone. So you can only imagine the value of that. And I think that the point is exactly the same that you're raising, is that unless you're listening externally to what your stakeholders want rather than just your shareholders, the same will apply. People will move, and it'll be the same internally. And while you've got this feeling of it, this kind of culture of insularity arriving, which Edelman talks about, then I think as long as that insularity is there and it's not addressed and people don't have those conversations, then you will have that impact.
And I think we need to think about, what people have in common. We used to be able to come
Right.
into organizations and have public discourse. There's,
Right.
and a lot of people will say that diversity and disagreement often lead to innovation, right, and opportunity. And I think that that's the piece that whenever I'm working with organizations through change, and whether that's micro change that's happening on the ground at their level, or change that's happening globally, economically, competitively, those are conversations you should be having in terms of, here's the state of where we are right now, here's our strategy to help us continue being stable and secure and safe, here's what we stand for, here are our policies and programs that are going to help protect you, right? And here are our values, and those values are connected to behaviors that are expectations that we hire and fire on, right? And like that, there are things that say there's a lot more things that an organization should have in common, and there should be a lot of things that the organization and leaders have to talk about, especially during these times of change.
Mhm.
And Jennifer, that must come right into your work in storytelling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I was going to say, like, to Alice's, well, I think what we're all talking about is these elements weaving through all aspects of organizational behavior, through communications, through HR, through and those as a microcosm of the larger, of what's going on more broadly. I mean, the polarization we're all experiencing and wrestling with I think is borne out in those numbers that you mentioned, Shell, in terms of people being unwilling to, being drawing lines in the sand about where they are willing to spend their time and energy. And so, yes, storytelling within the client organizations that I work with is one way of bringing that, bringing some of those common themes, those kitchen table themes together, to your point, Priya, around broader culture and the trust we have in that culture. So, there's a heavy lift on the part of both comms pros and HR pros and change management pros and all of us who are working with organizations who are wrestling with these things. From just to bring it back to your data, the data you cited, Shell, though, I think again we need to look at the up and coming generation of workers who will be coming into the workforce, who are, like Priya, my kids are just entering the workforce too as young adults, and I teach them, and they are coming at it from a very different perspective. And so our organizations, in addition to everything else, need to be adapting to that. Not to mention that many of them, because of AI factors, are going to be coming in at a different level of position. So plugging into the culture in a different way than we and subsequent generations did along our career path.
So Jennifer, when you say that they're coming at it from a different perspective, are you saying that they're coming at it from a less flexible approach in terms of, I mean, I've worked most of the big percentage of my career, I've been in the energy industry. And that meant I worked for and with oil companies. And very often, because my politics tend to be, and I don't want to get into that too much, but my politics tend to be more liberal. I have had back and forth discussions about energy policy, for example, and different points of view on that. And, but I knew that that was just policy. It wasn't the person. And now I think what we're seeing when we talk about insularity is people are not only judging others more broadly, a broader brush based on a political perspective, but they're also evaluating themselves with that same, I'm going to be this color person. And I think that there is a lot less flexibility and adaptability. And I don't know how we as communicators address that issue.
Yeah, I don't quite know either. And to answer your point, Alice, yes, that's exactly what I would observe is I don't know if less flexibility is the right terminology. It is a little more it's a little more choose your lane-ish around and kind of comes back to Priya's point about the possibility for discourse in the workplace and in our communities, right? Which has declined. And so the younger generation has seen or growing up with this idea that you have to take a side because everyone on TikTok takes a side, and so I need to as well. And I mean, I'm not. Gen Z is a. I'm not criticizing. I love the energy that they bring to discourse in a different way that is unafraid to challenge, and to Priya's point, unafraid to act first and ask questions later to a great degree. I just think we have a shift in the way that we our workplaces and our organizations and our clients need to ensure those voices are heard.
Yeah. And we were having a conversation at coffee this morning where people were saying you used to have this like upside down triangle that, or like it was a triangle where you had a lot of people come in junior in an organization in developmental positions and then work their way up. And now it's turned into a diamond because AI means a lot of those, what used to be entry level positions are not there anymore. And we see that with even young people who are trying to get jobs, and a junior job is asking for 2 years experience in the field. Mm-hmm. Right. And they're like going, well, how can I get 2 years experience? Like, so it's been interesting where they're coming into organizations and the expectations that exist, because there's this belief that these junior developmental positions don't exist anymore.
I think it's a whole different conversation to talk about companies not thinking about how they redefine entry-level roles mm-hmm. so that they accommodate AI. And of course, you can't have a conversation about communications these days without talking about AI, which we'll do here in a minute. But I was at the IABC World Conference last year in a session where the speaker quoted from a book about news. And the quote, I mean, this is something I think we all would agree with without having to think about it, but it just summed it up so nicely. News creates a shared reality. And I think back to the Walter Cronkite days, to the Woodward Bernstein days, where everybody got the same news, and it created that common reality for everyone. Today, people get the news from sources that fit their worldviews, and there's a shared reality within that insulated block of people, but there's not a shared reality across the entire population. Internally, I think we have an easier time of things. Richard Edelman said the workplace is now the only safe place which has rules on behavior. And I think one of those rules is that we tell you what the news is, and there is a shared reality around the news. But I did promise to talk about AI. What you have now, as employees increasingly have access to a chatbot that is connected to all of the company's internal data and resources, including the news, they're not sitting and reading the articles that we write. As much as they're typing a question into the chatbot, it's an ask-get relationship, and they get the answer without the context that we would provide to create that shared reality. So what do we do, both internally and externally, in order to meet the objectives that we have been assigned, to create that shared reality among our stakeholders, whether it's employees or customers or whatever that stakeholder group is?
Our internal
Wow.
Our internal communication audits will constantly say that the number one place they want to get information, and it's just been consistent over the years, is from leaders and their managers. Right? That so face to face, that they prefer email because it's quick and it's in their box. Still, that sometimes surprises me. But then a second and third are like town halls and at like my manager and town halls. Right? So I think that opportunity for face to face, but that opportunity to create dialogue in that face to face, not have those just one way conversations that allow people to ask questions and get context, is such an incredible opportunity.
I think that's absolutely right. I think that, if we say that our leaders are, my CEO is the kind of the most trusted figure in that Edelman Trust Barometer, then using that leverage to do what trust brokers do, which is create a shared reality or identify the shared reality, is exactly the role of the internal communicator and the external communicator in terms of, helping their leaders do that in an authentic and honest way.
Well,
I'm seeing some skepticism here. Shell.
Not for me.
Well, you're not seeing skepticism from me, but I think that that's why I said, wow, I think it's such a huge question that Shell asked. And I think I agree exactly with what Priya and Alice have said. However, and it's not a skepticism, it's because
yes,
yeah, because I think that the way that when we all started work, listened to what was being said to us. Well, that's the key thing, actually. We listened. We listened to what was being said. And I think that with, to the point that you were making, Shell, about the ask-get syndrome, if we're not, as communicators, communication professionals, not listening to what our audience, whoever it might be, whether it's internal or external, whether listening to what it is that they're going through, then we will lose them incredibly quickly. I mean, like within seconds. So if we're not talking a language or a subject area that is theirs, then they will switch off immediately. And I think that that's the added tension that we have with everything that you're talking about. And I think that with a town hall, if a leader or a CEO is standing up and saying, great, I'm going to do this because they want to see me face to face and they want to talk to me, I think the generation that we're talking about, and others, it's just we didn't articulate it in quite the same way as now this confident younger group of people, the Priya and Jen's children are walking in and they can spot BS a mile off. And in a way, I think that we kind of tolerated it and thought, oh, well, that's the leader. He does all that, and fine, we'll do the town hall and then we'll go back to our day job and that's fine. But actually it matters for this, this new generation, because they have so much more communication that they recognize, whether or not, to your word, Alice, which I think is at the heart of this conversation, whether they can trust this person, and they're off. If they can't trust the person, then they will check out. They'll either check out with their feet and go and find another job somewhere else, or they'll just check out of whatever that communication is. So as a comms professional, actually, your skill needs to be even more finely attuned to listening and communicating with that audience right at the heart of what you're doing.
And when we add to that the fact that equal to the CEO in terms of trust, so the trust barometer says people are trusting their CEO the most, and pretty much equal to that is my neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
So so when you think about that instant, Jane, to your point, that instant of trust switching or being eroded or shifting in some ways, all it takes is that mailbox conversation,
right?
In some cases, to lose the connection, to lose the trust.
Yeah, but that means we have to trust sharing information with our employees, right? About what's real, what's really happening. And I mean, I spent years in retail, and the one thing I loved about retail is they knew on a week by week, day by day basis, year over year, you had the data, you had the numbers, you had all of those things that guided action and decisions, right? And those things are factual because they needed that in order to serve and grow and meet the needs, right? And that's the piece that organizations choose what they share with employees. I want to make sure that whether we're announcing something positive or we're announcing something negative, like mass layoffs, that when they talk to the cashier, they have the same messaging, or the employee who's talking around the dinner table when we've gone through a crisis, that they've got the information, that they trust that information is correct, and they've gotten it from what they believe is the source of the truth.
And Priya, you mentioned the role of the manager, the direct supervisor earlier, and I think where that really comes into play is where employees want to know what this information is going to mean to us here.
Yes.
I think there are some messages where they don't need to hear it from their manager. If it's benefits, things like that. They want to hear that from the benefits department. But any announcement that leads them to go, what are we going to be doing different? What do we have to do more of or less of or differently? They go to their manager for that. But I would remind you that 42% of employees would rather switch departments than report to a manager with different values. So now we have that friction where I want to go to my manager, but my manager has different values and beliefs than I do. So I don't even want to work for this guy. How do we equip those managers and those frontline supervisors who, they most often don't get much communication training? How do we equip them to play that role?
It's that thread, right? I always describe it as a thread, right? You connect the values to the behaviors, you connect the words to the actions, you connect the strategy to the results, and it's all, and it has to be a thread that's connected. It's the disconnections that are what people struggle with. And it's really being able to first of all have information to the managers, because I always say, like, 75 to 80% of the answers your frontline manager should be able to give you to your questions, and that's why you give them toolkits and Q&A and everything else that's as comprehensive as possible. The other 20% is context setting, where they have to interpret a little bit, what do we think this means to us? Right? And guiding those conversations that are going on through that context setting, and training, because that's one of the areas that we haven't invested in, is training the people managers on how to communicate. and really understand how people are going to, and part of that communication, one of the things we always say is, here are the questions you can ask your team so you can actually listen.
Yeah. I also think it's
Yeah.
important to not just train them, but hold them accountable for doing that
Yes.
communication.
Well, right. And what it's making me think about is that organizations are not very good at leadership. They're brilliant at management, because managers are there to reach the targets, tick the box at the end of the month and say, yeah, my team did this. Excellent. Very good. So managers, technical or otherwise, get promoted into leadership positions, and suddenly they've got a team of people. And it's the age-old problem. How do you encourage, and we're kind of veering off communication, however, I think it's critical. It's all part of the same threads. It's the joining of the dots, is that organizations need to get better at equipping leaders to do this stuff, because they launch them into a leadership position on the basis that they've been great managers. That does not make them great leaders. And a part of the leadership skill development is being great communicators, and, as Priya said, people managers. They're not always naturally suited to that. And for as long as organizations just think about shareholder value, of course, they're going to keep promoting managers who just meet the targets and keep the shareholders happy. And until they start listening and recognizing that it's more about all of the stakeholders, then you will continually get this management group who don't believe that communication is part of their role. But it's absolutely fundamental. And if you've got the luxury of having a comms team of more than one, then maybe that is a part of that comms professional role in the organization, is to be very clear about why it's important for leaders to be great communicators and develop those skills.
I'll just add to that, Jane, that managers are promoted into that role based on what they did as an individual contributor, not based on any identified managerial potential.
Right.
But I think that, at least I've seen this with my clients, that they are recognizing how important it is to have cultural alignment in their managers. And they are doing performance reviews and making promotion decisions with those corporate values in mind. So they look for, are you living out these corporate values? And I think that to a person who is trying to decide whether they are willing to work under this person, that is the question that needs to be answered. Do they align with the corporate values? I don't think we can say that they need to align with, all of the religious, political, and economic values across the spectrum, but they need to align with the corporate values. And if they don't align with those corporate values, they are not getting promoted into managerial or higher positions. And I think that that's a change that's long overdue, and a change that is happening.
So all of what you're saying is kind of bringing me back to our first point, which is around the role of the communication professional very much being integrated with the role of the trust broker, or being one and the same. So if we agree that communication professionals serve a role as trust brokers within organizations, what are we doing to additionally deputize our managers as trust brokers, in addition to deputizing them in communication, empowering them with communication skills? And I've just kind of had an aha moment myself, because I've had in the last 6 months or so, I've had a very small spike in interest in training from organizations. I've always done training and workshops for organizations, but I've had a slight spike in people asking for training for manager level individuals in communication skills. And the penny drop for me at this moment is they're asking for storytelling, which and foundational communication skills, which really is about building trust, which really is about, it's not about knowing that I went to a hockey game with my son. It's not about, it's not about the actual story, the actual storytelling, which helps weave our connection to each other as humans for as long as time. But it is about building that position of trust so that we can then leverage that, use that as a cornerstone for improved communications across all levels of the organization.
It's kind of a chicken and the egg.
Yeah, it is.
Like trust building and communication skills.
Yeah.
If they don't trust you, they won't listen to your communication. But if you, I got lost.
If you but if you can't communicate it, if you can't communicate it, they're not going to trust you.
Yeah,
Although our Jane fell off her chair.
Yes.
So, Priya, you mentioned that we need, as employees, to trust the source of the information from the top of the organization. Going back to data from the Trust Barometer, 73% of people expect CEOs to lead trust brokering. Only 44% think they're doing it well. So what's the communication department's role in closing that gap? Are we coaching executives to be trust brokers, or are we the trust brokers ourselves working through them?
I think there's a word, but like the broker is the key part, right? It's that's the person who stands in the middle of that conversation, right? Whenever you think of a broker in any other context, they're the in between, and I think that's something that we need to be aware of. So we don't expect we expect the CEO to be trustworthy. We don't expect the CEO to be the trust broker, if that makes sense. And what I'll often say to CEOs, and I've been saying it to them for like 30 years, is that we create that, we actually support them to make sure that they are getting credit for being active and involved. Right. And because I've worked with organizations, they're 200,000 people. A CEO cannot sit in front of all those people, right? There's not enough hours in the day. So how can we create the impression, if you will, that they are active and involved and understand and listening? And that's where communication, and communication helps play that role, where you're hearing from them. We all know this, like it's really interesting for me when because I post on LinkedIn every day, and I'll go to a conference and then people will come up to me that I've never seen before, I don't know their name, and they feel like they know you. That's the way it works with leaders in organizations. If they're hearing from you often enough, if they're hearing from you that in a way that feels that it resonates with you on subjects that you're interested in facts that you're understanding their expertise, understanding their challenges, because it's the good and bad, it's the balanced conversations that make it more, and that vulnerability that make it more authentic. Right? Then they have the feeling that they know you. It's always fun to, when I was in-house, being able to travel across the country with a leader and observe the conversations, because they really felt like it's almost a little bit hero status, like celebrity status in some ways, and it's the impression that people are giving, and that's where we help broker that relationship between employees, leaders, and the CEOs of organizations.
And that takes me back in my thinking back to the rep track analysis that I quoted at the beginning. It's, as Priya says, it's not just about showing up. It's about showing up in a way that reinforces the fact that you, with the messaging, are being clear, that you're being transparent, and that you're listening. So, showing up and doing a fancy roadshow and saying, whoop, I'm here, is actually more detrimental, as per those figures, is more detrimental than showing up in the way that Priya has talked about. And therefore, the brokering comes from understanding. And I think they're both equally important, those words, because what are you brokering? You're brokering trust. And therefore, in order to gain that trust, you as a communication professional are the one that can advise and guide the CEO to make sure that that's precisely what they're doing, and not just showing up because they're showing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you can't do is be silent for 3 months and then show up.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And you need to close the loop, right? Like this is the
Yeah.
thing that I keep saying to organizations. You've asked somebody for feedback, you know, you've actually probably hopefully addressed some of that feedback, and then you
Yeah.
need to give people results, because then it feels like a conversation, a back and forth, versus a one-way,
Mhm.
one-way thing that they're never listening, and now they're asking me to get to the next survey and they haven't addressed the last one that they talked about.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here's what I'm going to do, here's what I'm doing, and here's what we did. That
Yes.
conversation that we all, that we all need to
And here's
adjust
what's
it.
next.
And here's what's next.
One of
Yeah.
my favorite observations was somebody raised the idea of survey fatigue, and this individual said, "There's no such thing as survey fatigue, just bullshit fatigue." If
Yeah.
Exactly right.
if people
Absolutely.
hear the results of the survey and then what the organization is going to change as because of that, they'll take surveys all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's when they take a survey and it just vanishes into the ether that they burn out on participating in these.
Yes.
I want to pivot to external communications for a minute. Over the last couple of years, we have seen a retreat by organizations taking a position on societal issues. And the Edelman Trust Barometer for many years has said that the audience expects business to address societal issues. The business among the four types of institutions that the Trust Barometer focuses on is the only one that's above water on trust. Government, media, and NGOs are underwater. So it is incumbent upon business as a result of that to take positions and to do something. But because of this insularity, because of people staking out their positions, it has become very dicey to do that. One of our sister communication organizations was under pressure from their membership to say something about the immigration crackdown in Minneapolis. And after a lot of silence, they sent an email to their membership. I am one of the members, so I got one of these that said, "We have decided not to say anything about this because it's political." And I took issue with this. I even wrote a LinkedIn post about it. I said, "I disagree. I don't think that you need to wade into the immigration debate. That is political. But on the other hand, as a communication association, I think your members are expecting you to say something about the dishonest information that is being shared by the organization. And surely we have members who work in the government who are being asked to produce this kind of disinformation and misinformation. And I think it is entirely appropriate for this association to take a position on that." And, it was crickets as a result of that. But I think I had about 75 comments from other members thanking me for articulating that. But this isn't the only organization that has retreated from saying things when they see something that is consistent with their stated values or their line of business or their geographic location or who their stakeholder audiences are. They're just all clammed up. What do we do about that? Or should we do anything?
That's a really tough question. And I'm the only person besides you, Shell, who's in the United States. And this, I think, is a very sort of US focused question at the moment. And I know that, you can take examples of companies who have decided to jump in feet first with following the mere thoughts expressed by the current administration in the US, and companies who have said, we are not jumping in, our values are such and such, and our values will remain. And I think the companies that are thriving are the ones that are saying, these are our values and they will remain. I think the ones that had expressed certain values and then have backed off from them to be more politically aligned are seeing pushback. Companies that never claimed to have any particular virtuous values other than making money are kind of safe because they haven't had to do anything. But the companies that I think are really getting pushback are the ones who have, stated a value and then backed off of it. So I think that whatever they're doing, you've got to be consistent.
And I think that's what happened after 2020, and everybody jumped on the DEI bandwagon, and we've had a lot of performative, actions. There weren't really anything that's really embedded. I can respect and empathize with organizations, especially the U.S. organizations who have presence in the U.S., really trying to stay under the radar so that they're not attacked. Right. And that their rules don't change, from a competitive positioning perspective and regulatory perspective.
Right.
Like I really respect that, because ultimately they're looking at all these things and say, what can we say? What should we say?
Right.
What we're seeing some of those organizations do, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, is then say internally, actually focus on policies, processes, and the way they manage people inside, to say, here's the actions we're taking to make sure you're all safe.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So they're focusing internally, and they're actually embedding practices into the organization that provide actions versus, being performative and trying to be vocal about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and that's what people are looking for. It's how they follow up. And if it was performative in the first place, then they're getting they're just a little bit of just rewards. And they need to figure out how to fix that. Unfortunately, fortunately for them, unfortunately for us, we're in an employer's market right now. So they feel they've got time.
Yeah.
I think that's going to change really, really quickly once we get into an employee's market.
Yeah.
If I think about companies and how they react, and back to your question, Shell, I heard an example. I haven't had a chance to look into it, but I love this example about, and it kind of links. It's one of the threads and joining the dots. There was a youth activist group who came out, a climate activist group, youth group, who came out against IKEA on the basis of the furniture that they were producing. IKEA took one look, thinking about what Alice, you've just been saying about values, and thought, okay, let's bring them in. So they brought in the youth activist climate group to help them with their sustainability agenda. And I haven't followed it up to see how it's going, but this happened in the last couple of years. And I thought, okay, that is a company that is living its values. It's looked at a problem. It's not retreated, hasn't buried its head in the sand and thought, okay, let's turn this around. And I thought that was a smart example of how you rebuild the trust, but also listen and provide that humility and courage to say, okay, come on in, help us out with this.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see on a broader sense, and I don't think it's in the Edelman survey data, which companies are the most trusted out of, if they say businesses are more trusted than government, than NGOs, then, which businesses.
Yeah, I've never seen a breakout of industries or company size.
Yeah.
But again, they do say that the audience out there, the public, expects business to address these, and clamming up because of fear. I mean, does that open opportunities for competitors to say, well, we'll take a position and we'll take your customers?
Well, I think that I can cite an example of a retailer and another retailer who have actually done that.
Okay. Jennifer raised this observation about Gen Alpha's tendency toward external blame and politicized whataboutism. As that Gen Alpha generation enters the workforce, which they are doing now, how do we design onboarding and workplace communication that builds that accountable culture that we were talking about earlier without triggering that grievance reflex?
Would you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, with Gen Alpha,
Right.
they are very insulated. They point fingers. In fact, I saw a video that this was, I think it was in the New York Times, and it was for Gen Alpha, older Gen Alphas, basically demanding an apology from boomers for the way things are, as if this entire cohort of 70 million people is to blame for the circumstances they found themselves in. I mean, let's face it, in every generation there are bad people in positions of power who do bad things, and that tends to roll down to the next generation. And I don't think the Gen Alpha is any different. I don't think the boomers are any different in having had those people, but there were also activists fighting against them. And I mean, as in any generation. But, this is the approach that Gen Alpha seems to be taking, is finger pointing and whataboutism. So as they enter the workforce, how do we mold them to be good corporate citizens, I guess, is the question. How do we onboard and communicate with them to build that culture?
Well,
You probably don't get boomers to do it.
no, you don't.
Yay, I resemble that remark.
I'm going to come back to Priya's emphasis on the word broker, right? Which is, indeed, the data shows that Gen Alpha looks more at external factors especially around grievances and those sorts of situations. We could also, the flip side of that is accountability to those around them. The calling out, the no bullshit, I see what's going on. And so, sure, there's some nuanced work to be done around engaging with those folks in workplaces that honestly comes down to listening and to that foundational piece that we talked about at the beginning. So
I think that what threw me was the idea of molding them, because that's not going to happen.
No.
And the other thing is, should we be molding them, right? Like,
No.
because chances are they're coming in already, focused on social responsibility, and they're actually trying to mold the organizations
Right.
and the other generations.
Right.
Like, would you agree with that? Like they're coming out of
100%.
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether that's it's how can we use that that understanding, because I do feel that we're coming to a reckoning of some sort that there's a lot of things that were happening. I won't get into details, but there's a lot of things that have been happening on our watch.
Totally.
And we just accepted them. I think this is a generation that's not accepting it anymore, and maybe we should go, hey, maybe that's exactly how we should be thinking.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
I don't want to use the word assimilation.
An allergic reaction to that word molding.
I think one of the biggest things that happens when communication works is both sides change.
Yes.
Right.
And I think that's where we are.
But we do have this desired culture that we want everybody to be part of. And we have a generation coming in that may be skeptical of any culture that they're being asked to be part of.
And so we adapt our culture to be inclusive and to reflect who they are as part of our workforce. I agree.
Right.
It goes both ways, again, to that role of broker. So who are the culture brokers in our organizations?
And a lot of those things do stay the same. Like, we think about those values words, right?
Yes.
It's respect, and respect can be hierarchical or it can be flat. What do we mean? What are we talking about?
We're talking about human beings.
Exactly.
So we're not talking about a generation of new robots. We're talking about human beings, and that brokering of that humility, courage, conversation.
What does that look
not
like
molding.
today?
We are out of time. We have 1 minute left.
We're just going to keep talking.
Well, we could, but we won't. because I do need to let everybody know about next month's Circle of Fellows, which it seems entirely appropriate is going to be focused on crisis communication. It's going to be at noon Eastern time on Thursday, March 26th. We have a great panel. Ned Lundquist, Robin McCaslin, George McGrath, and Carolyn Sapriel will be joining us to talk about crisis communication. Neville and I on our FIR podcast interviewed Philippe Bormans, I'm actually reading his crisis book right now, and talks about polycrisis as the new normal, and the idea that you can pull down a binder and say, here's our crisis plan, steps 1 through 10, let's start doing, doesn't work anymore because you have 6 crises coming at you at the same time, and maybe one has created the other. So it's fast adaptability that we need, the scaffolding for crisis management as opposed to a binder. So it should be a fascinating discussion again on March 26th at noon Eastern time. Hope everyone will join us for that. And I want to thank today's panel for what has been a really great conversation. As we say, it could go on, but it won't. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Shel.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
Great.
Shel.